And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. William Bell. He is the Executive Vice President of Products at phoenixNAP. William, are you with us?
I am. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Right. I will jump right in. All right, guys. I'm going to head towards, I think, the rounding out the final presentation here of this Megacast. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how we approach infrastructure security from a disaster recovery as a service perspective. And it's something that not a lot of people think about when they're looking at DR as a service. People are looking at, okay, what are my RTOs, what are my RPOs, and how much does it cost? But a lot of times they're not considering what is the security stance of the provider that I'm going to recover into, right? And how are they going to help me from an infrastructure security perspective? What is my compliance going to look like, as I kind of move in that environment? So we're going to talk a little bit about all those facets today. For those of you that aren't familiar with phoenixNAP, we've been around since 2009, and we've slowly been building one of the broadest infrastructure as a service platforms in the world. And today we're operating in 10 world-class facilities, with our flagship facilities being Phoenix, Ashburn, and Amsterdam. And we're providing a large, diverse array of services with a specific focus in disaster recovery and offsite backup. So it's definitely something that's near and dear to our heart, and we're going to try to walk you guys through some of that today. So when we look at the problem that most customers face when they're looking at disaster recovery and business continuity in general is they know they need it. They know they need some level of BCP program and some level of disaster recovery plan, but they're not really looking at it holistically. They're just saying, I got to get my data somewhere else in case something bad happens. They're not planning and budgeting for the problem. And traditionally, the reason is because it's really expensive. Before this concept of disaster recovery as a service, where you could replicate data from diverse infrastructure to some type of centralized multi-tenant infrastructure, setting up a disaster recovery site, even if it's kind of standby, was very expensive. And you just never used it. So you're paying for all this equipment, and it was just never, a great business. It was important. It was necessary, and a lot of businesses did it, but it wasn't something that they enjoyed doing, and it was kind of a waste of money in the traditional sense. So when we started approaching this problem, we were talking about, what are the options that exist today. Most of the options that existed when we launched our service portfolio were very infrastructure as a service, right? Like, here's my storage target, replicate to me, and I'll spin up your VM, right? And that's truly all the consideration that was applied to performing this service on behalf of customers. And they weren't looking at the business and the specifically the compliance and security stance of that business once it's live in production and running in the disaster recovery target. And so we said, okay, we're trying to change some of this paradigm. And we can't lose sight of the cost mechanics and the importance of disaster recovery as a service from a saving money perspective and OpEx expense perspective. But we do have to find a way to make this an environment like this more compatible for critical workloads that exist out there. And so we are trying to help customers make this decision, right? Do I want to keep doing this myself, or do I want to find a partner that can help me look at this problem holistically? And so when we look at this landscape and why, right, we have to reiterate what I'm sure a lot of my predecessors on this call have talked about, which is, security is vital to an organization. And security of the data is important wherever the data resides and where the data lives and breathes potentially once you've failed over, right? Production environment. And for all of the reasons that are listed here and many, many others, it's important to address these problems. And so, if you're looking at true disaster recovery as a service, you're looking at offsite backup, there's a lot of reasons to leverage a service like this. But the most important reason truly is to save the business from, the abhorrent expenses that exist with breach notification and customer attrition, but also to save the reputation of the company that you work for. And I think that those two things have to be kind of looked at hand in hand. And so we wanted to try to change that paradigm. And we run into all kinds of different concerns. As we talk to different customers out there and we look at this environment, customers ask us all kinds of questions about, how do you handle multi-tenancy? What type of resources am I given, right? How are you handling encryption? What does your uptime, documented uptime and availability look like? And the last thing, what does compliance and security look like for me in a multi-tenant disaster recovery as a service platform, right? How can you make sure that I'm going to meet all of the requirements that I've worked so dang hard on-prem to get under control in a cloud service? And so we've tried to meet this head on with what we consider to be a new level of secure cloud infrastructure. And so we're looking at all facets of the data that resides not only at rest in a disaster recovery target environment or alive in a production environment / failover of a production environment. And we're trying to ensure that we get a holistic approach to security of that data, right? And we're looking at the operating system, we're looking at the network, leveraging, next generation microsegmentation with NSX. We're ensuring that all customers have backups of their data, right? And we're looking at the infrastructure from a holistic threat management perspective, and we have a 24/7 SOC sitting there doing analysis on the environment, looking for attacks against the environment for the customers that have failed over, for the customers that chose to remain live in the environment. I think that that's something that's super important to consider, and really being transparent about the reference architecture that exists there. And we worked really closely with Veeam, VMware, Intel to really help make this a reality, to give the customer a great cloud experience, a self-service environment, an ability to point and click and create new workloads if necessary, post failover or in a wholly production environment, and really ensure that our DR targets for customers match the same level of security that we would provide to a hosted cloud customer that chose to run that environment full-time specifically in case a customer decides that a replication failover is a one-way trip for them, right? And it happens more often than you think, right? Where, a data center that a customer might be in completely burns to the ground, right? If in the terms of an office data center as an example. And sometimes DR is a one-way trip, and you have to be ready to run that environment there, protect that environment like it is running production all the time. And that's one of the biggest limitations that I see with a lot of the DR as a service platforms out there. They're not designed for that. In fact, in all kinds of ways, they restrict the size of virtual machines that you can run. They restrict the amount of networks you can have, the amount of bandwidth you can have, because they're not planning for you to stay there. And that is a big problem and a big trap that I think a lot of people have to consider. So this kind of dives in a little bit more, and I think we provided the slides here so you guys can download those, and if not, you can reach out to us directly and we'll get them to you. But this kind of goes into a little bit more detail of all the different things that we're doing, leveraging next generation infrastructure technologies, but also, the feet on the street teams looking at the environment, helping provide security, encryption, patch management, et cetera, for the infrastructure that exists in the target. And so that's, from a disaster recovery as a service perspective, from a production environment perspective, that is, the whole, kind of breadth of the service that we're providing today. But when people look at cloud services, a lot of times they're missing the boat from a SaaS perspective, right? And so we've started to try to address that. And I think, another event, we kind of announced this managed backup for Office 365 product line that we just launched. And our partners, our customers are super excited about it once they understand why it's necessary. And I think that's the biggest killer in all this. A lot of people look at Office 365, Salesforce, all these different Gmail. They look at all these different SaaS platforms, and they just assume that the data is being backed up for them and that they have perfect retention and everything's safe and secure. The reality is a little bit more complex, and we're not going to dive into why Office 365 in this call, but the reality is slightly more complex than that, right? We're faced with a situation where there are massive gaps in the control of the data that exists in these SaaS platforms. It's truly your data, you own it, and they're not responsible for its protection, right? Especially against things like accidental deletion or, insider threats and things like that. So definitely take a look at that if you're a big Office 365 user. And when we look at DR, we're really talking about our global infrastructure platform, right? So all of the services that we offer as a business, they roll up into our backup services, our DR services, because they're not really a specific infrastructure product. It's more of a solution that we're delivering, and they can take advantage of any of this broad infrastructure platform that we've created. And we're trying every day to try to mix and match and marry these things up to provide a more holistic service for customers that are trying to accomplish a disaster recovery or improve their disaster recovery stance. So wrapping it up, we'll take some questions. The cloud disaster recovery is, if you look at Gartner and all the research that they've put out on this topic, it is almost universally accepted as the only methodology that customers should be considering long-term, right, versus on-prem DR or no DR, right? So you have to take a look at that. Security is really bubbling up to the forefront with all these breaches that have been announced. Quora just yesterday, Marriott the day before, right? All these huge breaches. It's only going to get worse because data is growing. It's being dispersed. It's sitting in cloud platforms that are not specifically designed to help protect that data. It's being left up to an admin somewhere to point and click their way through security, and it's something that we have to take a look at and all work on together as a service. So Dave, is it okay if I dive into questions, or do you want to say anything before we go there?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's do some questions.
All right. So somebody asked, is the IAD solution that we're offering hosted at our sites or also customer sites? So from an infrastructure as a service perspective, it's only in one of our 10 global data centers. But from a DR as a service perspective, it's almost exclusively coming from, on premises, from a data center in someone's city or from a data center in someone's office, right? That data is being replicated from that location to one of our locations around the globe. We are looking at things in the future where we can possibly perform an infrastructure service kind of on-prem. As you look at technologies like edge computing and things like that, I think that's going to be necessary, but that's not our reality today. Somebody asked a little bit about Veeam and pNAP partnership. I think that it's, to some extent, in some communities, Veeam and pNAP have become somewhat synonymous with each other. And we're looking to expand that relationship all the time because we love Veeam and we love Veeam's customer base. There's a lot of users. There's a lot of rabid users out there of Veeam. So we like interacting with those people, and they're often a good fit for our services. So we do some more different technologies for replication, but Veeam is definitely our go-to technology for replication and offsite backup. We've got options to provide licensing for on-prem, so you don't have to actually have a Veeam license. You can just, get it from us and take care of your backups and do the replication or offsite backup. So anyone who's looking for more information around that can definitely provide that. I think there's been some questions leveraged about cost. A typical customer for us from an offsite backup perspective is going to pay anywhere between, unless you're at the extremes, you're going to pay anywhere between $25 to $30 per terabyte offsite that's backed up offsite to maybe as much as $65 or $70 per terabyte. So like 1 terabyte might cost you $70 or so for a month for that terabyte of data. But if you've got 20, 30 terabytes of data, you're going to be closer to that $30 a terabyte area. So I think that's very cost effective. It's easy, especially if you leverage Veeam today or any technology that supports S3. You can back up to one of our data centers worldwide, and it's pretty seamless and easy. All right. Anybody?
I've got a question.
Go ahead, David. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, a question for you. How do people typically get started? I mean, if an IT, say, manager or admin contacts you and says, hey, we're struggling with data protection and DR, how can you help us? What do you all do to understand that problem and provide solutions?
Absolutely. So we work with every customer almost like you're used to seeing and feeling from a traditional like OEM vendor, right? We have a call. We bring sales engineers to the mix. We talk about the problems. We talk about the potential solutions that exist to those problems, the pain points, and then we build a custom solution for the customer. Sometimes the quote-unquote custom solution is an out-of-the-box solution for us, right? Something we leverage every day. Sometimes it needs to be really, really, really stretched. Like I'll give you a quick example. There's a for-profit college that we work with that has 70 locations around the U.S. They replicate virtual machines from every single location, worldwide MPLS. Their total replication traffic is over a gigabit per second. So like when you look at an environment like that, it's months of planning, it's months and months of implementation. But for the average everyday customer, we typically can get from a conversation, a potential solution, a POC to an implementation within about 30, 45 days. So, it's pretty easy to get started. And all it takes is just reaching out. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to us through our website or give us a call, and we will have a personal conversation with you.
Very nice. Very nice. And I know that DRaaS obviously is a huge part of the phoenixNAP product set and solution. But what else do you all do? I mean, besides that, is co-location, security, networking, are those also areas?
Yeah, so I think that the one thing that people may not know, and maybe the name also maybe throws people off occasionally, but we're one of the largest VMware cloud providers in the world. So if you're leveraging VMware, you're looking at things like VMC on AWS, we're a great alternative to that, right? We're a little bit more flexible, a little bit more customized, a lot less costly, right? We've got a long track record in that space from a hosted cloud perspective. Co-location in all of those data centers. Our typical customer, Dave, is consuming multiple services from us, right? They're coming in maybe as a colo customer in one of our data centers. They're faced with a big refresh. They decide to move into a cloud service for their production data. They keep their old environment in our colo. They leverage it for replication, for DR. I mean, we just rolled out a new security service that we call InfraSentry. they're looking at that threat management service as a way to help protect that production data. That's a pretty typical customer for us. It's one of those things where, for a large organization, we're a great augment in some point solution. And for a small organization, say like 500 employees or less, sometimes we're a very holistic solution. We're covering basically all of their IT services so that they can focus on their regular everyday business.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, great presentation, William. I think that's all the questions we have right now, but thank you for being on the event.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. Have a great one.